barn and premises tour aims to observe the implementation of the on-farm food safety program and animal care program requirements. Let's take a look at a barn tour. Typically, during a barn tour, it is best for biosecurity purposes to move from the clean areas of the barn, the interior, to the dirty areas of the barn, the exterior.
On arrival to the farm, the first thing that we're going to do is a quick visual assessment of the laneway. We're looking for the general condition. We're looking for potholes or we're looking for standing water. If there's potholes, that may be a compromise to the birds as they're loaded and they're leaving the farm. If there's standing water, that may be an indication that there's an area for insect infestation. As we approach the farm, we're also looking for a clear distinction where the controlled access zone has been identified. On approach, I'll look for either a gate or, as I said, a clear area where there might be a sign that's posted. So with that, I found a visitor parking spot and I'm just going to go and put on my biosecurity equipment.
During the tour of the anteroom or workroom of the barn, if any requirements are not met, the auditor is to address them at this time to the farmer or farm manager that they are with.
As we were approaching the barn, some of the things that you're looking for are, is there a biosecurity sign posted on the exterior of the barn to indicate to anyone who might be coming in that biosecurity is in effect? I'm also looking if there's a functional lock and if the farmers actually had to use the lock in order to gain access into the barn. Now that we're inside the barn, we're making observations as to what sort of delineation there is between the controlled access zone and the restricted area. And in this barn, I see that there's a low step over wall. So this is where I'm going to start to heighten my biosecurity and put on my second set of boots. So in this situation, as I'm sitting on the bench, taking out my extra set of boot covers, and as I swing my legs over this bench, I'm going from the dirty side of the barn into what we call the clean side of the barn. And in this respect, anything that was on the floor or on the ground on this side of the barn is not going to be transferred into this side of the barn in the clean area. So as I look around the control room, I'm scanning for the water situation, I'm scanning for the controllers, the environmental controllers that are looking after what's going on in the barn. I also see on the desk a logbook. So one of the first things that I'm going to do is actually go and sign in. Okay, so now that I've signed into the barn, I'm going to turn my attention to the equipment that controls the environmental situation inside the barn. I can see in this barn that there's an all-in-one controller here, so I'm going to have a conversation with the farmer as to what this controller monitors. We're going to be looking at the temperature, the lighting, and the ventilation. In addition to that, I'm going to ask the farmer if there are any additional parameters that they're monitoring on a day-to-day basis for the birds. Something might include the humidity conditions that are in the barn. As I look at the controller, I can see what's going on in the barn, but I'm going to ask the farmer to give me an actual demonstration of the temperature, the ventilation that's going on, and I'm going to ask the farmer to demonstrate the lighting program to make sure that it's appropriate for the birds and the age of the flock. As I continue to work my way around the control room, I can see that there's an alarm system, so I'm going to have a conversation with the farmer about the alarm system and what it monitors for. The program requires that the alarm system monitors for temperature and power outages. I'm going to ask the farmer how he's notified when something falls outside of the acceptable parameters. As I continue to work my way around this control room, I can see that there's a water treatment system over here. I can see that there's a water meter. I'm going to have a conversation with the farmer as to if he monitors the daily water consumption. Daily water consumption can be a good indicator of the flock health. I can see here that there's a medicator on the wall, and I'm going to ask the farmer what they use the medicator for, if it's ongoing, if it's for water treatment, or if it's for curative purposes. As I look around the control room, I'm looking to make sure that it's neat and tidy. If there's any equipment here, does it have a purpose inside the barn? Once I'm satisfied with the conditions in here, I'm going to ask the farmer if we can actually go in and have a look at the birds.
The auditor must tour at least one barn per farm where birds are present. If there are multiple barns on the farm, then the growing area of enough barns must be toured to give the auditor confidence that the program requirements have been implemented correctly. Similar to the workroom tour, if any requirements are not met during the tour of the growing area, the auditor is to address them at this time to the farmer or farm manager that they are with.
Now that I've been in the barn for a couple of minutes, the birds have nicely acclimatized to my presence here. I'm going to ask the farmer how they conduct their daily chores. I don't want to do anything really different from what the farmer does, so I want to make sure that I'm modeling what I do after the farmer's daily chores. I'm going to look at the condition of the equipment. I'm going to make sure that the height of the feeders and drinkers is appropriate for the age of the birds. I'm also going to be looking at the lighting conditions. Is it even end to end? As I walk with the farmer through the barn, I'm going to feel for the temperature. Is it even end to end in the barn? Or is there any areas that might be too hot that may make the birds uncomfortable? I'm looking to see what the flock is telling me. Are they breathing normally? Are they vocalizing differently? Are they eating? Are they drinking normally? Are they resting or are they playing? So as I'm walking through the barn, I'm paying attention to the litter quality. I'm looking for areas, in particular under the drinker lines, where there might be some leaks. I'm looking to see if the litter remains absorbent, nice, loose, and dry, and able to absorb any excess moisture that's in the barn. As I walk through the barn, I'm paying attention to the overall condition of the barn, the cleanliness of it. I'm looking at the ceiling, I'm looking at the walls, I'm looking at the feeder and the drinker equipment, as well as the fans, to make sure that they're clean. I'm also looking at the number of feeders and drinkers to make sure that it's appropriate for the flock. As I look at the walls of the barn and at the general condition, I'm making sure that there's no holes in the walls that the farmer needs to pay attention to and repair. As we turn our attention to the catching, I want to make sure that there's an appropriate number of loading doors, that the catchers have access to the flock to make sure that they can get the birds out in a timely manner. Hand sanitation is another part of the audit that we want to make sure is in place on the farm. It could be in the form of a liquid hand sanitizer, it might be latex gloves, and in this case it's a sink. Regardless, we want to make sure that hand sanitation is available to farm workers when they're doing their work. And we're also going to want to make sure that it's functional. So in this case, we're just going to run the sink.
It is important to remember that a complete tour of the exterior of the barn is to occur, not just on one side of the building. If there are multiple barns on the farm, ensure that you walk around all barns present on site. If any requirements are not met during the exterior tour, the auditor is to address them at this time to the farmer or farm manager that they are with.
So now that we've finished the interior assessment of the barn, we're going to take a look outside and make an assessment on the outside of the building. We're looking at the general condition of the barn. We're looking at if there are any holes in the tin that might be a place where wild birds or where rodents or insects might find a home. This is the loading side of the barn. What I see when I look ahead is I'm paying attention to the laneway and the condition of the laneway. No potholes, no standing water. As I continue to walk down here, again, I can see that the loading doors are here. Are there an adequate number of loading doors to allow the catching to go on? I can see that there's eaves troughs along the entire length of the barn. Continuing down here, I can see that there's bait stations, rodent control stations. I'm going to have a conversation with the farmer as to how they rate their rodent program and how often they rebait the stations. I'm going to want to make sure that I'm going to have a look inside the bait stations just to make sure that there is bait in there. We're also making an assessment on what we see. Is there any evidence of rodent activity? Is there any assessment of wild bird activity around here? A part of the audit requires a farmer to manage their mortality. Daily mortality in the barn is something that happens. So the farmer needs to make sure that they're looking after it in an appropriate manner that doesn't present any risks to the remaining flock. On this farm, the farmer has 2 composters in this building, and normally what I would do is go in and have a look at it just to make sure that the farmer is managing them properly. Now we're coming around to the back of the barn, and this is where the manure is pushed out of the barn. So one of the requirements here is that there's no organic matter that remains within the controlled access zone. So what I'm going to be looking for is the pad at the back to make sure that it's nice and clean. So I'm coming around the back and I'm scanning the area just to make sure that there is no organic matter, and it looks nice and clean here. There's no organic matter up and in contact with the barn itself. It all looks really nice. And now I'm coming around to the non-loading side of the barn. I can see the farmer has put a layer of gravel on the non-loading side of this barn, which is a great deterrent for rodents, and it's also a good weed barrier. So as we continue down towards the front end of the barn, we're approaching the feed bins. We want to make sure that if there are any feed spills, that they're cleaned up right away. And as I look at this, I don't see any evidence of feed being on this pad for very long, so it's cleaned up right away. I'm looking at the general conditions of the bins themselves, the cones, the boots, the auger line, just to make sure that there's no breaks in it where the feed might actually get out. So I do see these bins have been numbered, and that's a requirement in the program that they've been identified. One of the requirements in the program is that farmers look after the medicated feed with withdrawals. We want to make sure that they put in what's called a control measure, and that could be switching from one bin to another, or it might be banging down on the bin. So often you'll see a rubber hammer sitting outside of one of these bins, and you can look on the cone and you might see some witness marks where the hammer has been hit on the side of the bin. When bedding material is stored on the farm, we're going to make sure that we bring that into the audit. We want to make sure that the farmer is storing the bedding in a manner that's not going to present any risks to the birds. So what we're going to be looking for is how is it stored. We're going to be looking for evidence of any wild bird activities, any wild animal activities. We're also going to be looking for any rodent controls. We want to make sure that when there's a rodent control program in place around the bedding material, that it doesn't have any chance of being introduced into the bedding, which is then going to be introduced into the flock with the chickens. So as I look around, I'm going to be looking at the quality of the bedding. I'm going to be looking for any signs of wetness, any mold, and again, I'm going to be focusing on that bedding, on the rodent controls. On farms where they don't have their own bedding stored, it's usually delivered by an outside company. And we want to make sure that our farmers are engaged with that company so that they can give them assurances of the quality of the bedding that they're receiving. One other part of the audit requires us to look at the medications and chemical storage, as well as water treatment and then the backup power. So what we have here is the generator building. So let's go in and take a look. So now I'm in the generator building. And I'm going to have a look at the generator just for the general condition. I'm also going to have a conversation with the farmer about his testing frequency on it. The requirement is that the farmer tests the generator every flock. In addition to this, because the chemicals are stored in this building, I'm going to have a look at the chemicals. I'm going to make sure that the labels are intact on them, that they're properly labeled, that nothing has been transferred from its original container. And in addition to that, I'm going to have a look at the expiry dates on those products.
For additional detail, please review the On-Farm Food Safety Program and Animal Care Program manuals, as well as the Auditor Guidance Tool.